Sometimes the past clings to you like a thick shadow that you can't get rid of. It doesn't just haunt you, it grows in your consciousness, is absorbed into your bones, and becomes a part of you. Matt Collins always believed that he had left his childhood far behind, but no matter how hard he tried, it came back to him in the most unexpected moments. Sometimes at night, when he woke up in a cold sweat, and sometimes in quiet moments of loneliness, when life seemed almost perfect. He was born and raised in a poor area of Nashville, in a house that was more like a card structure, one wrong move, and it would fall apart. His mother, Linda Collins, was a strong-armed, tired-eyed woman who held two jobs to keep her son from feeling left out. She never complained, but Matt could see her shoulders hunching with fatigue and her fingers trembling as she sat at the kitchen table in the evening, going over bills that just wouldn't add up. His father left when Matt was only 5 years old. He didn't remember the details, but he still felt the emptiness he left behind. His mother didn't talk about him, and Matt himself learned over time not to ask unnecessary questions. All he had left of his father was an old penknife he found in a box of things in the attic. As a child, he often took it out, snapped the blade, imagining himself as his mother's protector, a superhero who would not allow anyone to abandon her again. He realized early that this world is cruel and does not owe anything to anyone. The yard in which he grew up was filled with endless showdowns, dirty streets, and kids who either became criminals or disappeared into nowhere. Matt wanted neither. He was smart, but quick-tempered, strong, but restrained. He fought when necessary, but never attacked first. His mother told him, "Strength is not your fists, but the ability to solve problems without them." These words were imprinted in his mind, but sometimes he still doubted whether it was true. Matt wasn't an excellent student in school, but he knew how to gain respect. He earned money by working at a car wash, carrying newspapers, and sometimes even repairing old cars for his neighbors. It gave him a sense of control over his life. But at the same time, he saw how his peers were drawn into crime, looking for easy money and disappearing without a trace. He knew he didn't want to be one of them. When he turned 17, he realized that the only way out was to leave. The street, the school, even the mother, all this became a tight cage from which it was necessary to get out. The army became his escape and salvation. On the day he left for duty, Linda looked at him with eyes that mixed pride and fear. "Just come back, son," she said, and he swore he would. But when he returned, he was already a different person. The war burned out the softness from him, made him tougher, more calculating. He learned to hide his emotions and became someone who can control pain and anger. He knew how to survive. He knew how to win. He was calm in battle, but deep down he was still the boy who dreamed of protecting his mother. When Matt joined the army, he thought it would be just another phase of his life, a possible path to something more than poverty, streets, and disappointment. However, the war quickly destroyed his illusions and taught him what his years of living in a poor area of Nashville had not taught him. The first thing he learned was the need to obey orders. In his studies, he was forced to forget about personal desires and ambitions. There was only one rule here: survive. The days were filled with grueling training, sleepless nights, and exhausting drills. He learned to assemble and disassemble weapons blindfolded, move on rough terrain, and recognize danger by the smallest signs. He became part of a mechanism that did not tolerate weakness. The first combat mission came a few months after the completion of training. He was sent to Afghanistan, one of the most dangerous regions. Heat, dust, uncertainty, all this put pressure on the psyche, but most frightening was the feeling that death could come at any moment. Unlike the street fights of his youth, here the enemy was invisible. It could be hidden behind a nearby hill, underground, or even among local residents. One day, as their patrol was moving through a narrow street, an ambush began. The first shots rang out suddenly, and Matt and his comrades instinctively rushed for cover. Bullets whistled overhead, the roar of explosions shook the ground. He saw one of his friends, a guy named Rodriguez, fall, clutching his leg. Matt didn't think twice. He rushed towards him, dragging him along, taking cover behind the remains of the wall. His heart was beating wildly, but his hands acted confidently. He knew that if he left Rodriguez, he would die. When reinforcements arrived, the battle was over. The enemy shooters disappeared, leaving behind only ruins and blood on the hot ground. Rodriguez was taken to the hospital and survived. Later, back in the tent, he grabbed Matt by the shoulder and said, "You saved my life, brother. I will never forget this." These words stuck in Matt's memory for many years. But things didn't always end so well. In one of the raids, their group lost its commander, Sergeant Greaves. He was their mentor, a man who knew how to survive in this meat grinder. His death was a cruel reminder that war spares no one. Matt saw death staring him straight in the eye and realized that the familiar world where you could simply hit your opponent with your fist was long gone. Service changed him, turning him into a man who could no longer afford weakness. He learned to kill, but that wasn't the hardest part. The most difficult thing was to live with this knowledge, to look in the mirror and realize that he had lives behind him that he had cut short in order to survive. One of the scariest moments happened during a night patrol. Their group stopped a convoy of cars, suspecting that one of the cars contained explosives. Among the passengers was a woman with a child. She cried and begged not to come closer. Matt hesitated, but his commander ordered to open fire when he saw the woman reaching for her belt. At that moment, he didn't think he just pulled the trigger. It later turned out that she was indeed carrying a suicide vest, but this did not make the situation any easier. He didn't talk about it to anyone, but these moments haunted him. What he remembered most was the child's eyes. They did not express anger, fear, or hatred, only misunderstanding. This look came back to him in his dreams, causing him to wake up in a cold sweat. Years passed, but the war left unhealed scars in his soul. He returned home a hero, but deep down he felt like something else. He knew his past would never let him go completely. It became a part of him. The Nashville Fair was buzzing like a disturbed beehive. Everywhere there was a smell of fried meat, cotton candy, and fresh caramel apples. Children squealed around the rides, their faces lighting up with delight. The ringing voices of barkers were heard everywhere, inviting people to test their luck in various competitions. Country music flowed from the speakers on stage as local performers showcased their talents as the sun set, turning the sky warm shades of gold and scarlet. Matt Collins walked along the main avenue, barely aware of the commotion around him. After several years in the army, he was still not used to so many people, but tonight he decided not to hide from the world. He needed to remind himself that life went on, that here in his hometown there were still the simple joys he remembered from his childhood. He came to the fair just to look, to feel nostalgic, to feel like he was home again. Loud laughter could be heard from one of the tents. Matt turned his head and saw a group of young girls standing at the ring toss stand. The center of their attention was one tall, slender, with long blonde hair fluttering in the wind. Her laughter was infectious, light and sincere, and her smile blinded like a camera flash. She threw the ring, and it landed softly on the bottle, causing those around her to applaud. "Brittany, you are a born champion," one of the friends exclaimed admiringly. "Just luck," the girl shrugged, but from the way her eyes sparkled, Matt knew she liked the attention. He couldn't look away. Brittany. The name suited her perfectly, sonorous, bold, alluring. She looked as if she had stepped out of the pages of a glossy magazine, but at the same time she felt at home here, at the dusty fair. She was 23 and radiated a confidence that attracted the gaze of men around her. And although he didn't know who she was, he felt like he wanted to find out. He stepped closer, watching with interest as she tossed the ring again. This time it missed, and Brittany sighed, crossing her arms. Her blue eyes met his brown ones, and for a moment time stood still. She looked at him with a slight challenge, as if appraising him. "Are you watching because you want to learn, or are you just enjoying the show?" she asked with a grin. Matt didn't answer right away. He wasn't one for small talk, but something about this girl made him smile. "Maybe both," he answered calmly. Brittany tilted her head slightly, studying him. He didn't look like the local guys who only had parties and fun on their minds. There was something serious and adult in his gaze. His broad shoulders, confident posture, and the way he carried himself spoke of strength and self-control. This intrigued her. "Then you should try," she said, handing him the ring. "Show me what you are capable of." Matt grinned and accepted the challenge. He took the ring, weighed it in his hand, took aim and threw it. It slid softly through the air and landed perfectly on the bottle. The crowd around them burst into cheers. "Wow," Brittany whistled. "Looks like we have a professional here." "Luck," Matt repeated her words, shrugging his shoulders. She laughed loudly, openly, and this sound somehow reminded him of home, calm evenings, when he did not yet know what it meant to live in constant combat readiness. For a moment, he caught himself thinking that he had not felt such simple pleasure from someone's company for a long time. "Brittany," she introduced herself, holding out her hand. "Matt," he replied, shaking her hand. Her skin was warm and her handshake was confident, without the affectation that so many other girls had. She looked him straight in the eyes, as if checking who he was. He answered her in kind. "So what brings you to the fair, Matt?" she asked, crossing her arms over her chest. "I wanted to remember what it was like to just be here." He did not go into details. Brittany nodded as if she understood. She wanted to ask more, but felt that this man was not the type to open up right away. "Then you are lucky to have met me," she smiled. "I'm a master of entertainment." "Yes," he grinned. "And what do you propose? Shall we ride the Ferris wheel?" she suggested, raising an eyebrow. Matt looked up at the huge structure with the flashing lights, then back at it. Brittany looked at him defiantly, and he knew that refusal was not an option. "Why not?" he said, shrugging his shoulders. She grabbed his hand and pulled him towards the line without wasting a second. Matt didn't expect this, but he didn't protest. Brittany was a whirlwind, and he suddenly realized that he didn't mind being in the middle of it. Sitting in the booth, they found themselves alone, surrounded by the twinkling lights of the fair. The wheel began to move, and Nashville began to slowly spread out beneath them. Brittany smiled as she looked at him. "I think you should smile more often, Matt," she said. He slightly raised the corners of his lips. "You might be right, Brittany." And at that moment, when the city spread out before them and the warm wind ruffled her hair, Matt realized that he would remember this evening for a long time. With each meeting between Matt and Brittany, the sparks flared brighter. Their attraction was inevitable, like two magnets that could not stay away from each other. For Matt, Brittany was a breath of fresh air, a bright ray of light in his new, peaceful life. She was lively, energetic, and full of ambition. In her eyes, he saw something that he himself lacked: confidence in the future, the courage to dream without boundaries. They spent evenings together, walking the streets of Nashville, going to small, cozy cafes, and getting to know each other's favorite places. Brittany loved to talk about her life in the modeling business, about photo shoots, catwalks, social events, where she shone in outfits from the best designers. But with all this external splendor, she felt that something was missing in her. It seemed to her that she was only half living, constantly looking into the future, but not feeling firmness under her feet. "You know, Matt," she said one evening as they sat on the roof of one of the skyscrapers, looking at the city lights, "I was always chasing something." She wanted more, better, wanted to be the center of attention. "But with you, for the first time, I feel like I can just be myself." Matt listened to her, taking in every word. He understood what she was talking about. He knew what it was like to search for meaning in life, to try to fill the emptiness inside. "And I," he admitted, "lived for so many years in a world where every day could be my last. In the army, we didn't think about the future, we just survived. Now I'm learning to live again, and it seems like I'm succeeding with you." They laughed, shared dreams, and told each other stories from the past. Brittany listened with delight to Matt's stories about his service, his comrades, and the difficulties he overcame. She saw in him a strength to lean on, a person who always kept his word. Matt, in turn, watched with admiration as Brittany lit up, talking about her plans, about fashion, about the world she wanted to conquer. Her enthusiasm was infectious, making him feel that life could be joy as well as struggle. Every day spent together only strengthened their bond. He found inspiration in her, and she found stability, which she always lacked. Their worlds, so different, began to intertwine, becoming something new and unknown. They did not yet know where this path would lead them, but they were sure of one thing: they felt good together. A year has passed since the very fair where their paths first crossed. A year of laughter, honest conversations, walks under the stars, dreams of the future, and quiet evenings when they could simply enjoy each other's presence. Time flew, but every moment was imbued with something special, something that left no doubt. They had found their destiny. The wedding was supposed to be a reflection of their love, sincere, simple, and warm. Brittany had always dreamed of a big celebration, but when it came time to plan, they both realized they wanted something more intimate, something that would mean just the two of them. A small white church on the outskirts of Nashville was the perfect location. This was the same church where Matt went to as a child with his mother, and where he first felt what home and family meant. On the wedding day, the sky was cloudless, as if Providence itself was blessing their union. Brittany stood in front of the mirror in the small room where she was being prepared for the ceremony. She was delightful. Her dress, simple but elegant, emphasized her natural beauty, and her light curls fell on her shoulders, creating an image of tenderness and freedom. In her hands, she held a small bouquet of wildflowers, exactly the same ones that Matt gave her during their first meetings. "Are you ready?" her friend Caitlin asked with a smile, adjusting her veil. Brittany took a deep breath, looking at her reflection. She had never felt more confident. "Yes," she answered, "more than ever." On the other side of the church, in a small room, Matt stood in front of his best friend and best man, Jason. He looked slightly tense, but there was determination in his eyes. "I never thought you were the kind of guy who gets so excited before a wedding," Jason teased, slapping him on the shoulder. Matt chuckled. "This is not excitement, but the realization that I am entering the most important battle of my life," he answered, but there was no fear in his voice, only confidence and anticipation. When the first notes of the wedding march sounded, the church was filled with anticipation. Matt stood at the altar, his heart beating faster than during the most dangerous moments of the service. Brittany walked towards him, her eyes shining with happiness. At that moment, the whole world disappeared, only the two of them remained. "You're amazing," he whispered as she came closer. "Do you still think this is a battle?" She smiled. "No," he shook his head. "This is a victory." The priest spoke the words, but they hardly heard them. They looked at each other, holding hands, their hearts beating in unison. When it was time to say the vows, Matt squeezed her hand a little tighter and said, "Brittany, from the first time I met you, I knew you changed my life. You are my home, my dream, my light. I promise to protect you, respect you, and love you every day of our lives. I promise to be your support as you became mine." Brittany's voice wavered as she spoke. "Matt, you are the person who showed me what it means to truly be loved. You are my hero, my best friend, and my destiny. I promise to go with you to the end, to believe in us, to be yours always." The words were simple, but they sounded like endless love. When the priest pronounced them man and wife, Matt leaned over and kissed her. The guests applauded, but they only heard the beating of their hearts. That evening they danced outdoors among twinkling lights, surrounded by friends and family. The night was filled with laughter, music, and the feeling that this was just the beginning of something great. Brittany leaned against Matt, looking up at the stars. "Are you happy?" she asked. Matt looked at her, knowing there was only one answer: more than ever. After the wedding, Matt Collins had no intention of stopping. He always dreamed of something more than just stability. In the Army, he learned discipline, perseverance, and determination, and now all these qualities were supposed to work for him. The idea to open a construction company came to him back in the days when he was returning from service. He saw how houses were built, how new neighborhoods were created, and understood that this was not just a job, it was an opportunity to leave a mark on this world. Matt started small. He had no starting capital except for the money that he managed to accumulate during his service. He took out a small loan, purchased the minimum necessary equipment, and rented a warehouse in a suburb of Nashville. His first orders were minor: someone asked to fix the roof, someone to replace the windows, but he took on everything. realizing that now the main thing was to earn a reputation. He worked day and night. For the first months, there were no days off, no rest. He himself went to take measurements, purchased materials himself, monitored the workers himself, checking every detail. Sometimes he himself stood up for the instrument if there were not enough people. Clients quickly noticed his diligence and honesty. He made no empty promises, never inflated prices, and always delivered work on time. This became his main advantage. Meanwhile, Brittany also faced a choice. Her modeling career, which had once been her main aspiration, no longer seemed so important. She loved attention, loved podiums, but every day she realized more and more that she wanted a different life. She liked the idea of being close to Matt, being a part of his success, even if it was in the shadows. And one evening, when he returned home tired, but pleased with the results of his next project, she told him, "I'm leaving the modeling business." Matt looked at her in surprise, putting his phone aside. "Are you sure? This was your dream after all." She nodded and sat down next to him. "You know I liked it, but I don't feel like it makes sense to me anymore. I want to be near you, help you, support you. Your business is growing, and you need help with documents and clients. You can't do it all alone, Matt." He looked at her for several seconds, digesting her words. Then he nodded. "You can't even imagine how much I need this. But I don't want you to sacrifice your dreams." "This is no longer my dream," she smiled. "Now my dream is to be with you and build something bigger." From that point on, Brittany took over the administrative side of the business. She communicated with clients, organized meetings, did accounting, and oversaw marketing. Thanks to her efforts, people began to learn more about the company. She created a website, ordered advertising banners, and started social networks where she posted photographs of completed projects. And the work went even faster. The number of orders increased, so we had to hire more people. Matt chose only reliable workers for his team, understanding that quality is more important to him than quantity. He didn't just want to build houses, he wanted to create something he could be proud of. But this path was not easy. There were often delays with materials, unscrupulous contractors, and bureaucratic delays. There were moments when it seemed like everything was falling apart. One day, one of the clients refused to pay after the work was completed, and this was a serious blow. But Matt didn't give up. He learned to understand legal aspects, learned to negotiate in such a way as not to lose benefits, but also not to make enemies. In their house, there was less and less talk about anything extraneous. Almost all the time they discussed projects, orders, and plans for development. Brittany sometimes missed social events and a glamorous life, but she never regretted her decision. "Seeing how my husband's business grows, how he himself becomes more confident, stronger, how he is respected, it was worth all the sacrifices." It took several years before Matt could say his company was truly established. Now he no longer worked alone. Now he had a team, an office, and regular clients. But one thing has remained constant: his approach. He knew that the main thing was trust. And as long as people knew they could count on him, the business continued to grow. Matt kept his word. He had promised Brittany a better life, and now he could give it. His construction company flourished, orders grew, and his reputation grew stronger. Everything he had worked for day and night finally began to bear fruit. He wasn't a man who measured success solely by money, but seeing Brittany glow with happiness was the greatest reward for him. When they found this house, Brittany immediately knew this was the place where they should live. A two-story mansion with white columns, a wide porch, and a spacious veranda, surrounded by the greenery of a well-kept garden, stood in one of the most prestigious areas of the Nashville suburb. Inside, there are high ceilings, marble floors, large panoramic windows filling the rooms with soft sunlight. Brittany fell in love at first sight. "He's ours," Matt said without hesitation. He saw her shining eyes, her childish delight, and realized that he had made the right decision. Brittany couldn't believe her new life. Just a few years ago, she dreamed of such luxury, leafing through magazines, watching the rich and famous. Now she herself was part of this world. The new home became her kingdom, and she enthusiastically set about furnishing it. Designers, the best furniture stores, custom projects, she wanted every corner of this place to reflect their love and success. But the gifts didn't end there. Matt had always been generous, but now he could afford more. Brittany received the best jewelry, designer dresses, and expensive bags. He gave her cars, travel, dinners in the most prestigious restaurants. Every time he saw the sparkle of joy in her eyes, he knew he was doing everything right. "You make me the happiest woman in the world," she told him one evening as they sat on the terrace of their new home, enjoying the view of the sunset. "You deserve it," he replied, covering her hand with his. They were happy. Their life seemed perfect. They loved each other. They had everything you could dream of. Brittany enjoyed her role as the mistress of the house, supported Matt, and was there for him in all his endeavors. He, in turn, felt that he had finally found his place, his purpose. Nashville became a city of opportunity for them, a city where they built their future. And at that moment, it seemed that nothing could disturb their happiness. And now Matt Collins is 38 years old. He was a successful man whose life seemed like the embodiment of the American dream. Tall, broad-shouldered, with strong arms, hardened by years of work, he looked like a man who was used to taking responsibility and carrying it to the end. His brown eyes, once full of youthful fervor, now had a hardened look, but behind that armor still lay the soul of a man who knew what true affection was. Brittany, his wife, who had just turned 35, still looked like she stepped off the cover of a glossy magazine. Slender, well-groomed, with impeccable features, she is used to being the center of attention. But behind her outer gloss was a woman who knew what she wanted. She was used to living beautifully, enjoying every minute of her existence, and was in no hurry to tie herself to the role of a mother. Brittany has always said that children are a huge responsibility, and she's not sure she's willing to sacrifice her freedom for that. Matt didn't argue. He also wasn't sure that he wanted children, or maybe he was just used to living the life that they had. Harmony reigned in their home, albeit based on pragmatic decisions. They enjoyed success, travel, expensive dinners, and complete independence. Their life seemed ideal, and none of them saw the point in changing anything. But behind this flawless picture, there were moments that Matt did not discuss even with himself. Sometimes in the evenings, when he was alone in his office, a strange emptiness came over him. He didn't know where it came from, but he understood that even wealth, success, and a beautiful wife do not always fill the inner emptiness. Brittany didn't think about such things. She lived in the moment, planned her next trip to Europe, discussed new designer collections with her friends, and enjoyed the carefree life, where there was no room for worries about family, children, and everyday routine. At first glance, they were an ideal couple. But even the most immaculate homes have shadows that are not always visible from the outside. The ideal life they so strived for began to falter. At first, these were subtle changes, minor, almost imperceptible. But over time, they grew deeper, like thin cracks in a solid foundation that threatened to destroy the entire edifice of their marriage. Brittany, accustomed to attention, luxury, and comfort, increasingly felt lost. She once took pride in being Matt's muse and inspiration. She left her modeling career, accepting the role of a devoted wife to a successful man. But the years passed, and now she felt that her role was reduced only to a beautiful image that needed to be maintained. Money, which once seemed like a symbol of their victories, became her addiction. She learned to live in a world of expensive boutiques, beauty salons, luxury trips, and dinners in the best restaurants. Each purchase gave her a temporary sense of satisfaction, as if filling a void that she couldn't even explain to herself. Brittany knew that she could afford whatever she wanted, but with each new acquisition, the joy lasted less and less. Matt, on the other hand, was engrossed in business. The company grew, projects became larger, and he spent more and more time on work. He left the house early in the morning and returned late at night, exhausted but happy with the progress he had made. He believed that he was doing everything for the sake of both of them, for the sake of the future that they once built together. However, in this race for success, he did not notice that his wife had been living in another world for a long time. They began to talk less. Brittany often ate dinner alone when she didn't consider partying with her friends her main entertainment. She filled the void with a noise of clubs, the laughter of casual acquaintances and champagne, which seemed to smooth out her worries. "You're late," she said one day when Matt, tired after a long day, walked into the bedroom. "I know, I'm sorry," he answered briefly, unbuttoning his shirt. "There was an important contract." "You always have an important contract." Her voice sounded hoarse from the glass of wine she was holding in her hand. "When was the last time we had a normal evening together?" Matt sighed, running a tired hand over his face. "Brittany, I work for us." "Don't you like the life we lead? Didn't you want this?" She looked at him, and something new flashed in her eyes. Sadness. Disappointment? "I wanted to," she answered quietly. "But now I'm not sure if this is enough for me." The words stuck in the air, heavy and unfamiliar. Matt remained silent, not knowing what to say. He really didn't understand what the problem was. They lived better than 90% of people. They had everything you could dream of. He gave Brittany everything he could, but it seems that this was not enough. From that moment on, she began to change. Clothes became more and more expensive, evenings became longer and longer, and their general conversations became shorter and shorter. Brittany spent more and more time outside the home, and her phone became a constant companion that she did not ignore. She loved to demonstrate luxury on social networks, publishing photos from expensive resorts, from elite events, where she was surrounded by people who had no problems with attention. Matt noticed everything, but did not interfere. He told himself that this was temporary, that everything would return to normal. But deep down he knew that the first cracks in their marriage had already appeared, and the only question was whether they could repair them or the building of their life together would collapse under their weight. Matt has always been a pragmatic person. He understood that success requires not only work, but also the ability to manage finances. His construction business was thriving, but he had no intention of stopping there. A new project was maturing in my head, which could be the next step forward. This required time and money, which meant costs had to be cut. He decided that it was time to cut back a little on spending, especially in those areas that did not bring tangible benefits. This primarily concerned Brittany. She was accustomed to a life of luxury, and in recent months her shopping had become increasingly erratic. New designer bags, jewelry, trips to expensive beauty salons, and dinners at elite restaurants, all this added up to considerable sums. When he first told Brittany about the budget cuts, her reaction was surprisingly calm. "I understand," she said, throwing her arms around his neck. "You're doing this for us, for the future." Matt felt relieved. He expected some resistance, but Brittany seemed to really understand the importance of his decision. However, he soon began to notice something strange. She still bought expensive things, but no longer discussed her spending with him. He noticed new jewelry, dresses, bags, and all this appeared, despite the fact that his cards and accounts were now more strictly controlled. Brittany was leaving home more and more often for business, but when he asked what exactly she was doing, the answers were vague. "I was just meeting with friends," she said, glancing past him. Or, "I stopped by the boutique, there was a sale, I couldn't miss this opportunity." Matt tried not to dwell on it. He was busy with work, negotiations, and planning for the future. However, an uneasy feeling settled inside. One evening, when Brittany returned from another trip, he noticed her outfit, an expensive dress that he definitely did not buy, and a new necklace that sparkled in the light of the chandelier. "Beautiful," he said, nodding at the decoration. "Is this a gift?" "Well, you could say that," Brittany smiled, but there was something forced in her smile. Matt didn't question further, but his concern grew. He knew that if he wanted to figure it out, he would have to pay closer attention to what was happening. Something in Brittany's behavior had changed, and he couldn't figure out why. Matt was not a man prone to suspicion. He believed in trust, built relationships on honesty, and always tried to see the best in people. However, lately there had been a growing feeling in his head that something was wrong. Brittany has changed her lifestyle, her habits, her behavior. But he still hoped that this was just a temporary change, perhaps caused by boredom or a desire for something new. But then he found the check. It happened by chance at the end of a long working day. He returned home earlier than usual, tired but pleased with the results of the meeting with investors. Brittany wasn't home, so he decided to tidy up the kitchen a little. When he removed his wife's bag from the table, a sheet of paper folded in half fell out of it. Matt didn't notice right away, but when he picked it up and unwrapped it, his heart stopped for a moment. It was a check for $5,000 made out to Trevor King. The name seemed familiar to him. He frowned as he looked at the paper and felt a cold chill run down his spine. The check was dated several days ago. Matt couldn't just ignore the discovery. It seemed to him that Brittany was becoming more and more secretive lately, but he tried not to dwell on it. Now he had a real, tangible fact in his hands, not just emotions, not guesses, but concrete evidence that something was happening. He sat down at his laptop and typed Trevor King's name into the search bar. A few seconds and a page of a famous law office appeared in front of him. In large letters it said, "Trevor King is the best divorce lawyer." The chest pain was sharp and unexpected. He reread the text again, then looked at the receipt again. He didn't need any further evidence to realize that his wife might be planning to leave him. Suddenly, all the strangeness of the last few months came together into a single picture. Frequent business trips, expensive purchases, sudden cooling in between. Brittany wasn't just changing, she was setting the stage for something more. Matt felt his heart clench with anger and disappointment. He couldn't believe that the woman he trusted, whom he showered with love and care, could betray him like that. But now he needed to act. He wasn't going to sit back and wait for her to make the first move. He decided to find out the truth. Matt couldn't stay in the dark any longer. His inner voice persistently whispered to him that it was time to act. He was a man of direct decisions, but this situation required a careful and smart approach. Keep an eye on Brittany yourself. It would be unwise. He needed a professional, a person who knows how to obtain information without arousing suspicion. There were several private investigators in Nashville, but one name immediately popped into his mind: Leila Morgan. Her reputation was impeccable. People said that if anyone could find the truth, it would be her. A former journalist, she moved into private investigations when she realized that her intelligence-gathering skills could be more useful in other fields. She didn't just look for facts, she felt them. Matt wrote down her number, found a contact site, and dialed. "Leila Morgan," the voice was hoarse, but confident. "This is Matt Collins. I need to meet you. The matter is urgent." "Everything is urgent. What exactly do you need?" "I want you to keep an eye on my wife." There was silence on the line. Then a short laugh. "A classic of the genre, Mr. Collins. The husband suspects his wife of cheating. Do you want proof or just to hear confirmation of your fears?" "I need the truth," he answered dryly. "Then we'll meet at the Radford Cafe in an hour." Matt was surprised by the speed of her reaction, but this only strengthened his confidence in the right choice. The Radford Cafe was a quiet place with darkened windows and old wooden tables, an ideal place for meetings that do not attract attention. When Matt walked in, Leila was already sitting in the corner, looking at something on her phone. He approached her table. The woman looked up and nodded. She looked like she had seen too much in this life. Dark hair is gathered in a careless bun, the skin is slightly tanned, the gaze is tenacious, studying. "Sit down, Mr. Collins," she said, putting the phone in her pocket. "Tell me what brought you here." Matt sat down, folded his hands on the table, and looked at her. "I think my wife is planning a divorce," he began. "Found a check for $5,000 from a divorce lawyer. Brittany has changed. He often leaves and appears with expensive things. She acts like she's building a new life, but she doesn't tell me about it." Leila listened in silence, tilting her head slightly. "Do you want to find out if she is cheating on you or just preparing the ground for leaving?" she asked. "I want to know everything. Where does she go? Who does she meet? I need to understand what's going on." "Okay," Leila nodded. "I have standard conditions. I monitor, photograph, record, but I don't install bugs in houses. I will pass on everything I receive to you. If hacking or illegal methods are required, look for someone else." Matt crossed his arms over his chest. I need facts, not dirty tricks. Then we agreed. Leela took out a small notebook. I'll need her photographs, her usual routes, the places she loves. Car, what are her numbers? Matt took out his phone, scrolled through the gallery, and showed her a few pictures of Brittany. Leela glanced briefly, nodded, and wrote something down in her notebook. Great. I'll start tomorrow. Do you have timing preferences? The sooner the better, Matt replied. Leela looked up at him. Are you ready for what you will find out? He thought about it. Was he ready to hear confirmation that his marriage was failing? The truth will not change because I don't know it, he said firmly. Leela grinned. Good answer. Then I'll see you in a few days, Mr. Collins. I will contact you first. She stood up, put the money for coffee on the table, and headed towards the exit. Matt watched her leave, realizing that he had just taken a step that would change his life forever. It's been 2 weeks since Matt hired Leela Morgan. All this time he lived in tension, trying to act as usual, but his thoughts kept returning to Brittany. He watched her more closely than ever, noting every detail. The way she styled her hair before going out, the way her phone was almost always on silent, the way her smirk became a little more fake when he asked where she had been. Every evening when Brittany returned home, Matt felt anger boiling inside him. He didn't show it, but he waited. He waited for Leela to bring him answers. And then, on the 15th day, the bell rang. Collins, Leela's voice, was as even and calm as always. We need to meet, today, at 9 o'clock in the evening. Radford Cafe. Did you find something? He asked, although he already knew the answer. Come and see for yourself. Matt arrived at the cafe 20 minutes before the appointed time. He ordered black coffee and sat in a corner where no one could overhear him. The minutes dragged on unbearably long, and when Leela finally entered, he immediately knew that she had brought something important. She silently placed the envelope in front of him and sat down opposite him. It's all here, she said, crossing her arms. But I'm warning you right away, you won't like it. Matt took a deep breath and opened the envelope. There were photographs inside. The first is Brittany getting out of a car parked in front of a luxury apartment complex. The second, she enters the elevator with a tall man in an expensive suit. The third, she is in the penthouse, sitting on the same man's lap, hugging his neck. And finally, the last one, their lips are closed in a kiss, and Brittany's hands slide over his chest. Trevor King. The name immediately flashed into my mind like a red warning light. He's not just a divorce lawyer. He is a lawyer who showers Brittany with expensive gifts. She's with him. Leela's voice brought him out of his stupor. They have been dating for several months. I watched her, followed her movements. Meetings in his penthouse take place 2 to 3 times a week. Sometimes they stay there for several hours, sometimes a little more. Matt was silent. Everything inside him seemed numb. He knew something was wrong. I guessed it, but seeing it with my own eyes was unbearable. Leela took a small voice recorder out of her bag and pressed a button. A woman's laughter rang out. His laugh. He knew this sound, loved it. But now it cut into his ears like a blade. He doesn't even know, Brittany said. God, how naive he is. He thinks that everything is fine with us. But do you know what's funny? What? Trevor's voice was low and relaxed. I can spend as much as I want, and he doesn't even ask questions. Just imagine what he'll look like when he finds out I'm leaving. Brittany laughed. I'll take everything from him, Trev. Business, home. Everything he so diligently built will be mine. There was the sound of glasses, a slight clunk. They drank until his fall. Leela turned off the recording. I didn't write everything down, she said, but I think that's enough. Matt slowly looked up at her. An icy indifference filled my chest. What are you going to do? Asked Leela. He clenched his fists, but his voice was calm. Nothing yet, but soon she will regret that she decided to betray me. Matt spent the night without sleep. He replayed the photographs in his head over and over again, heard Brittany's voice, her laughter, her ridicule. His world seemed to be falling apart, but he wasn't about to lose control. No, he will not act rashly. He won't let them win so easily. The next morning, he called Leela again. I need you to continue surveillance, he said, without wasting time on formalities. Find out what they are talking about, what plans they are making. I'm especially interested in King. Leela paused, then calmly answered. Understood. It will be done. Another week has passed. Brittany continued her game, pretending everything was fine. She returned home, smiled, said that she was at a meeting with friends or at the spa. Matt listened and nodded, but a hurricane was raging inside him. On the 8th day, the phone rang. There is news, said Leela. You need to hear this. They met at the same Radford cafe. Leela came with a tablet and a voice recorder. I've gone further than just surveillance, she said, opening her laptop. I listened to a couple of their conversations in closed places, and you won't like it. She pressed the button. Brittany's voice. Trev, are you sure this will work? He's not an idiot. He can guess. Trevor's voice. Of course it will work, baby. I've done dozens of cases like this. You file for divorce first, making yourself the victim. We already have certificates, remember? Those that confirm that he is supposedly aggressive. This is enough for the court. But he never hit me, Brittany answered hesitantly. So what? The main thing is how it looks on paper. We can take the testimony of your friends, say that he intimidated you. You'll get half of it, maybe more. What if he starts digging? She asked. Trevor laughed. Britt, he's a construction worker, not a detective. By the time he realizes that he was scammed, you will already be far away with the money. Trust me, I know what I'm doing. Leela turned off the recording and looked at Matt. This is what I found out, she said quietly. King is not just her lover. He manipulates her into playing by his rules. He wants your money, and Brittany is just a tool for him. Matt stared into space, clenching his fists. The anger inside him turned icy. Now he knew what to do. Thank you, Leela, he said. Now they play by my rules. Matt sat in his office, staring at his phone. His fingers clenched into a fist, and he felt his nails digging into his palm. Now everything has become completely clear. He held on, hoped, sought an explanation, but at that moment his last doubts evaporated. The marriage he thought was strong was just an illusion built on deception. He wasn't just losing his wife, he was losing years of investment in a man who was willing to ruin his life for money. Somewhere deep inside, the thought was still simmering. Maybe he's wrong, maybe Brittany will change her mind. But then he remembered her laugh on the tape, remembered how she talked to Trevor about the divorce, how she discussed his property as if it were her personal trophy. Matt stood up and walked around the room. He has always been a man of action, and now is the time to act. But not in a rage, not in a hurry. He couldn't afford to make a mistake. That evening, he returned home earlier than usual. Brittany sat in the living room, glass of wine in one hand, phone in the other. She quickly put it away when she saw it. You're early, she remarked with a forced smile. Yes, he sat down opposite her, carefully examining her face. She was beautiful, well-groomed, but he no longer saw in her the woman with whom he had once fallen in love. Now he saw only a lying mask. How was your day? He asked in an even voice. Not bad. I went for a massage, then met the girls. She took a sip of wine, avoiding his gaze. Matt nodded. He knew that she was actually dating Trevor. Leela handed him the photographs. They sat in a cafe, Brittany enthusiastically discussing something, and Trevor just nodded, grinning. You look tired, she noted, tilting her head. Everything is fine. He looked into her eyes, and for the first time in a long time saw slight concern in them. Brittany wasn't sure if he knew anything. He could have told her everything now. He could have asked directly about the bruises, about their plan, but he decided to give her a little more rope so that she could tighten the noose herself. Everything is fine, he replied. It's just a lot of work. She relaxed, nodded, and took another sip. That evening, he watched her especially closely. The way she moved, the way she spoke, the way she sneaked glances at her phone when she thought he wasn't looking. At some point, he realized that Brittany had already made her decision. The question was not if she would betray him, but when she would do it. Matt wasn't going to wait for this moment. He was going to be one step ahead. Matt decided that if his wife wanted to play the lie, he would play too, only according to your own rules. The next day, he woke up earlier than usual, cooked breakfast, and served it to Brittany straight into bed. When she sleepily opened her eyes and saw a tray with scrambled eggs, freshly squeezed orange juice, and coffee in front of her, her eyebrows shot up in surprise. "Good morning, beauty," he said, sitting down on the edge of the bed. "I thought you deserved a special start to your day." She took the fork in confusion, as if not believing in the reality of what was happening. "This is nice," she muttered, popping a piece of omelet into her mouth. "What's happened?" "Nothing," he smiled. "I just thought I'd remind you how special you are." Brittany stared at him with slight suspicion, but didn't argue. She had not received such signs of attention from her husband for a long time. He was busy with business, focused, immersed in work, and now suddenly a romantic breakfast in bed. Something was wrong here, but she decided to enjoy the moment. The surprises didn't end there. In the evening, he took her from the house without explaining where they were going. Brittany tried to ask, but he just smiled a mysterious smile. When the car stopped at a private country restaurant, her eyes widened. "Here?" she asked, getting out of the car. "Do you remember that I adore this place?" "Of course I remember," he answered, offering her his hand. "Today is a special evening." He ordered her favorite dish, the wine she always drank, and was attentive all evening, looking at her as if she were the only woman in the world. Brittany was shocked. There had been a coldness between them in recent months, but today it was like she was back to the beginning of their relationship, when he was wooing her. "You're acting. Unusual," she said as he raised her hand to his lips. "Maybe I just realized that I should pay more attention to you," he answered calmly. Brittany smiled, but there was something like worry in her eyes. She didn't understand what was happening, but she felt that this was not just a sudden outburst of love. Matt studied her reaction carefully. She enjoyed the attention, but at the same time tried to understand if there was a catch. She didn't know that this was not love. It was a game. His game, and he was going to win. Matt was no fool. He knew Brittany and her lawyer were already preparing to strike. If he doesn't take action, everything he's built over the years will end up in her hands. He couldn't let that happen. Her betrayal was not just a blow to his heart, but a threat to everything he had created. The first steps were to hide assets. He worked quietly, methodically, leaving no traces that might alert her or her lawyer. He hired a financial advisor he trusted and began transferring money to funds registered to shell companies. His business, which until recently was listed entirely in his name, now belonged to a chain of legal entities that even the most experienced lawyer could not find without a serious investigation. Bank accounts were closed, lines of credit were renegotiated, and the properties he owned were neatly transferred into trust. Officially, he no longer owned most of his assets. To the world, he remained a successful businessman, but now his wealth existed in the shadows, invisible to the hands of others. The night turned out to be cold. An abandoned bar on the outskirts of town was the perfect place for meetings that weren't meant to attract attention. Leela was already waiting for him, sitting at a table in the far corner where the only dim light came from the ceiling lamp. "You look like you just came out of a funeral," she said, taking a sip of whiskey. Matt sat down opposite him, clasping his fingers together. There was no more pain or doubt in his eyes, only cold calculation. "In a sense it is," he replied. "I buried illusions." Leela looked at him carefully, as if assessing the changes. She knew that this day would come, but now, seeing him in this state, she realized that there was no turning back. "So you have made a decision?" she asked. "I want her to pay." There was no rage or emotion in his voice, only icy calm. "And I know that you can help me." Leela grinned, setting her glass down on the table. "It won't be easy," she said, "but I like challenging tasks." He nodded. "Then let's begin." Leela leaned closer, her eyes studying his expression. "You loved her, didn't you?" she asked. "For real?" Matt took a deep breath, ran his hand over his face, and nodded. Did you love it? I idolized her. She was my everything. I carried her in my arms and fulfilled her every wish. Brittany never wanted for anything. I built this business not only for myself, but for us. I wanted her to live like a queen. She didn't have to think about bills, about work, about problems. I gave her everything. Leela remained silent, allowing him to speak. I remember one day, in the early years of our marriage, we were on the beach in Miami. She was laughing and splashing in the water, and I looked at her and thought, damn, I'm so lucky. I believed that she felt the same way as I did, but now I know. For her, it was all a game. She enjoyed the attention, the money, but not me. Not by me, Leela. Leela nodded, weighing his words. I've seen women like this. They like to be the center of attention as long as there is a benefit. But when something goes wrong, they throw people away like unnecessary trash. And Trevor, he just helped her decide when to throw you away. I gave her everything, Matt repeated, his voice rougher, and she decided that she could take and destroy everything that I created. I won't let her do this. Leela tapped her finger on the table. You want revenge. This is understandable. But what exactly are you planning? Matt looked at her, his lips twitching into a cold smile. I want her to feel what I feel. Betrayal, loss, despair. I want her to think she's in control, and then everything falls apart before her eyes. Leela thoughtfully twirled the glass of whiskey in her hands. This can be arranged, but you must understand that this path has no return. If we start, we will finish it. I've already passed the point of no return, Leela, he said firmly. Let's get started. Leela sat opposite Matt, drumming her fingers on the table. A tense silence fell between them. The bar was empty except for an elderly bartender lazily wiping glasses at the bar. In the dim light of the lamp, her face seemed thoughtful, almost sad. I shouldn't do this, she finally said, shaking her head. This is beyond the law, Matt. He looked at her carefully. Pain was visible in his eyes, but there was no prayer or despair, just calm determination. I'm not asking you to break the law, Leela, he answered quietly. I ask you to help me protect what belongs to me. She sighed and ran her hand through her hair. Everything inside her screamed that this was wrong. She was used to being on the side of the law, used to seeking justice, and not playing at someone's revenge. But something about the story touched her. Maybe because she once stood in Matt's place. Did you know that my husband betrayed me? She asked suddenly, looking into the void. Matt didn't answer, letting her speak. 5 years of marriage. I thought we were building a family, a future. And he was building something with another woman. All this time, he lied, smiled, pretended to love me, and then just left, leaving me with nothing. Her lips trembled, but she quickly pulled herself together. I swore then that I would never allow anyone to do this to myself or anyone I respect. She looked up at him. That's why I'm helping you. Not because of the money. Not because I like to dig into the dirt of other people's relationships. But because betrayal is the lowest form of lying. And people like Brittany should get what they deserve. Matt nodded. Thank you, Leela. I appreciate it. She leaned back in her chair and bit her lip thoughtfully. There is one woman. She began after a long pause. Sonia Rivera. In the circles where she moves, they call her Madam. She runs a chain of high-end sex agencies in Memphis. But this is just a facade. In fact, she is much more than just a business owner. She knows people, knows how to solve problems. Sometimes in a legal way, sometimes. Not really. Maybe this will interest you. Matt frowned. And how can she help me? Leela grinned. Sonia does not tolerate traitors, especially women who leave men for money. She has her own story, and I think she will see you as someone worth helping. If she agrees, Brittany won't even realize how her world will begin to crumble. Matt thought for a moment. He wasn't sure he wanted to drag anyone else into this, but if Leela trusted this woman, then maybe this was the chance. Can you arrange a meeting? He asked. Leela nodded. Give me a couple of days. I'll talk to her. But remember, Matt, if we go down this path, there's no turning back. He exhaled slowly and extended his hand across the table. I crossed this line a long time ago. Leela shook his hand, her gaze serious. Then let's do this right. The bar was just as dark and deserted as last time. Leela sat at the farm table, arms crossed, watching Matt walk inside. He looked calm, but Leela knew that a hurricane was raging inside him. They agreed to meet here to discuss the next phase of the plan. Everything is ready, she said when he sat down opposite. Sonia agreed to the meeting. Tomorrow at midnight. Are you sure you want this? Matt looked at her, his brown eyes full of determination. I want her to understand what she did, he said. Disappearance is too easy. I want Brittany to realize every mistake she made, so that every night she falls asleep with the thought of how she lost everything. Leela nodded, carefully studying his face. You've changed, Matt, she said quietly. When we met, you just wanted the truth. And now you want punishment. Because I realized who she really is, he answered without a shadow of a doubt. Brittany never loved me. She loved money, power, and luxury. She loved herself. I was simply a convenient resource, and now she has to pay for it. Leela sighed and took a sip of whiskey. Sonia is not an ordinary person, she said. Her services are expensive, but she knows how to make people experience real pain. Not physical, emotional, psychological. It can destroy life, but not dirty, not rude, and so that a person digs a hole for himself. Matt smiled slightly. That's exactly what I need. An abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of Memphis seemed like an odd place to meet. Matt got out of the car and looked around. A neon sign flashed in the distance, illuminating the darkness. The door to the building was slightly open, and dim lights were burning inside. Leela was already waiting for him at the entrance. Ready? She asked. More than, he replied. They went inside. At the far table sat a woman smoking a thin cigarette. Her long dark hair was combed back, and her eyes, black as night, studied him with a slight grin. Matt Collins, she said, taking a drag. So you are the same man who was betrayed by his woman. Sonia Rivera, he answered, sitting down opposite her. Leela said you could help. She grinned and put the cigarette in the ashtray. I can do a lot, Mr. Collins. But my services are expensive. Are you ready to pay? Matt nodded. Money is not a problem. The question is, can you make her understand that she made a mistake? Sonia looked at him carefully and then slowly smiled. It can be arranged, she said. But first tell me, what do you really want? He looked her straight in the eyes. I want her to lose everything. For her world to collapse, but not right away. Slowly, so that she has time to realize her mistake. I want her to go through the same hell that I went through, to understand who she betrayed and what she lost. Sonia leaned forward, her gaze becoming serious. So you need more than just revenge. You need justice. Perhaps, he nodded, but it should look natural. No violence, no trace. Sonia laughed. I like you, Mr. Collins. You have a backbone. Fine. I'll take on this matter. Tomorrow I will send you the conditions and details. I hope you understand that after this, there will be no turning back. Matt didn't even blink. I won't go back. Patience. Brittany shouldn't suspect anything. Everything should look natural, as if he himself came to the realization that he wanted to save their marriage, and he began to act. The next day at breakfast, he sipped his coffee leisurely, watching Brittany. She sat opposite him in a silk robe, absent-mindedly scrolling through her social media feed on her phone. Her thoughts were somewhere far away, perhaps with Trevor. Her smile became rare, and her attention to him became superficial. He knew that she was no longer mentally with him, but in her new future, where he was just a step along which she was going to walk. But today he had to surprise her. I thought, he began, as if casually, we could use a little rest. Just like before. You loved our spontaneous trips, right? Brittany looked up at him, raising an eyebrow in disbelief. Rest? She asked again, trying to hide her suspicion. Matt grinned, pretending not to notice her wariness. Yes. You just worked so hard on yourself. You have so many things to do, shopping, friends. I realize that I haven't paid attention to you for a long time. I want to fix this. Brittany relaxed a little. It sounded convincing. And where do you want to take me? She asked, taking a cup of coffee. To Memphis, he answered calmly. There is a luxurious hotel, a spa, and excellent restaurants. We will just relax, without unnecessary thoughts. She thought about it. Memphis wasn't her dream city, but maybe a change of scenery would be good. Moreover, Trevor had really been on her mind lately. He insisted that she hurry up with the paperwork, but Brittany felt like she had to do it right. There was no point in rushing. When do you want to go? She asked, pretending to consider the proposal. Friday, Matt answered. I have already organized everything. This took her by surprise. Has he really thought this through? Strange. Over the past months, he had been so absorbed in work that he hardly paid attention to it. And now suddenly a caring husband? In the past, she would have been delighted with such an offer, but now everything seemed different. However, she couldn't afford to push him away. Not yet. That's nice, she said, smiling. I think we really need to spend time together. Matt covered her hand with his and squeezed it a little tighter than necessary. I'm glad you think so, he said, looking into her eyes. Brittany couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Matt was too attentive. She was used to his fatigue, to his coldness, and now he suddenly decided to have a romantic weekend. She tried not to dwell on it, but thoughts were already swarming in her head. She spent the day walking around boutiques with friends, but even while shopping, she couldn't get the trip out of her mind. She even wrote to Trevor. He's acting strange. Suddenly, he decided to give us a rest. What do you think? The answer came within a few minutes. Maybe he feels something is wrong. Be careful. Brittany put her phone in her purse. Of course, Trevor is right. Matt wasn't stupid. But on the other hand, how could he know anything? She carefully hid everything, and her meetings with Trevor were always thoughtful. In the evening, she returned home and was met by the same caring husband. Dinner was already ready, candles were burning on the table. Brittany smiled, but worry settled inside her. Dinner by candlelight. You really decided to surpass yourself, she remarked, sitting down at the table. You deserve it, he said, pouring her wine. She took a sip and looked at him over the top of her glass. He looked relaxed, content, as if nothing was bothering him. Maybe I'm just too suspicious, she thought. She didn't know that the game had already started, and that Memphis would become not a place of rest, but a trap from which she could no longer escape. The Memphis hotel was luxurious, bathed in soft golden chandeliers, impeccably dressed staff, and a view of the river. Brittany walked into the spacious room, inhaling the aroma of expensive perfume and fresh flowers. Everything looked perfect. She almost believed that the trip was really just a gesture of goodwill from her husband. Matt stood at the window, watching the city at night. When he heard Brittany enter, he turned around and smiled. How do you like the number? He asked. Gorgeous, she admitted, walking past the mirror and straightening her hair. I didn't think you could still be surprised. I'm trying, he said, hiding a smile. She came closer and hugged his waist, looking up at him. For a moment, she almost believed that he really wanted to restore their relationship. Almost. Tonight, I want to introduce you to an interesting woman, Matt said suddenly, taking a step back. Brittany frowned. Who is this? Business lady. We met through mutual friends. She runs an elite club in Memphis, deals with investments. His voice was light, calm, almost careless. I think you'll find it interesting to talk. Brittany blinked. Why does he suddenly want her to meet some businesswoman? This doesn't look like him. Okay, she said carefully, but why? You always wanted to try something new, he reminded, shrugging. Who knows, maybe you will have common interests. Brittany studied him with her eyes, trying to catch a catch, but found nothing. She knew Matt could be difficult, but he never lied to her face. If he's up to something, she'll know about it. The only question is what exactly. The hotel restaurant was on the top floor. They entered a half-empty hall, where soft jazz flowed smoothly through the air. Brittany immediately noticed the woman at the far table, Sonia Rivera, tall, elegant, with an icy gaze that left no doubt about her strength. Brittany, meet Sonia, Matt introduced, making a hand gesture. Sonia raised her eyes, her lips curved into a barely noticeable smile. Very nice, her voice was soft, but there was a hidden steel in it. Brittany smiled discreetly and shook the outstretched hand. The woman looked dangerous and fascinating. Brittany didn't know what exactly she was doing in life, but something about her presence made her keep her distance. Matt told me a lot of interesting things about you, Sonia continued, lazily stirring her glass of wine. I hope the evening will be pleasant. Brittany smiled wider, but her fingers tightened nervously on the stem of her glass. She had no idea what awaited her next. Brittany tried to look relaxed, but everything inside her was clenching. Sonia was not just a businesswoman, she radiated predatory confidence, as if she was used to dictating terms and getting what she wanted. Brittany didn't like the feeling of being under the gaze of a woman who clearly knew more about her than she should. Sonia glanced at her and smiled. Brittany, have you ever thought about returning to the fashion world? She asked, leaning forward and lightly touching the edge of the glass with her fingers. Brittany winced. She had not been asked about this for a long time, but the thought of returning to the podium always lived somewhere deep inside. She had long believed that her career was in the past, but now that someone was offering such an opportunity. I think this stage of my life is already behind me, she said uncertainly. Perhaps, but not necessarily, Sonia nodded, studying her reaction. You are beautiful, elegant, and most importantly, you know how to present yourself. Nowadays, the high-standard market demands confident women who understand the value of their appearance and know how to use it for good. Brittany raised an eyebrow. Are you offering me a contract? Sonia took a sip of wine, paused, and then said softly but firmly, That's right. Exclusive shows, advertising campaigns, work with the most influential brands. You will be able to again experience the life that you once abandoned, and this time on my own terms. Brittany felt a shiver of excitement run through her body. She stole a glance at Matt, but he looked completely unperturbed, as if this conversation had nothing to do with him. It's tempting, she admitted, not hiding her interest. Sonia smiled, tilting her head to the side. I knew you would have a taste of opportunity. You deserve better, Brittany, so why not take what you already have in your hands? Brittany looked nervously in the rearview mirror. The car sped through the deserted streets of Memphis, and her heart beat with impatience and anticipation. Sonia said that this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, meeting with influential investors, people who could make her the new face of the fashion industry. Brittany was sure she looked perfect makeup, perfect outfit. Everything has to be perfect. Are you sure we're going to the right place? She asked the driver, an elderly man in a formal suit who seemed completely indifferent to her excitement. Miss Rivera asked me to bring you here, he answered calmly. She pursed her lips, looking at the road. The area looked increasingly abandoned. Old warehouses, rare street lights, a flashing neon sign with shabby letters. It didn't look like a business meeting place. An alarming thought flashed through her head, but Brittany quickly dismissed it. Sonia knows what she's doing. The car stopped in front of a large warehouse with metal gates. Brittany came out and shivered. The night air was cool, and the silence that reigned around seemed ominous. Suddenly, the warehouse door opened, and two men in dark clothes appeared. One of them is tall, with a rough face, the other is shorter, but with fast, predatory movements. Brittany smiled uncertainly. Good evening. I'm Brittany Collins. Are they waiting for me? Her voice was firm, but anxiety was arising inside. The tall man nodded, gesturing towards the door. Of course, Miss Collins. Come on in. She took a step forward, but suddenly something hard and cold hit her in the back of her head. A bright flash flashed in his eyes, and the world fell into darkness. Matt sat in his car, parked in the shade of the old hangar, and watched. He saw Brittany step out of the car, her proud posture slowly giving way to worry, her eyes beginning to dart around the warehouse. She sensed danger, but it was too late. The blow was fast and accurate. Her body collapsed limply into the hands of Sonia's people, and they silently pulled her inside. Matt exhaled slowly. He had been waiting for this moment. Not rage, not relief, just cool satisfaction. This was the final chord of his revenge. Brittany always loved to be the center of attention, loved to play with fate. But now she herself has become a pawn in someone else's game. The truck's headlights turned on, illuminating the warehouse. A few minutes later, the door opened again, and the men carried Brittany out, now bound and blindfolded. They loaded her into the car, and it moved smoothly. Matt watched her disappear into the darkness. His hands clenched into fists, but he didn't let his emotions get the better of him. He no longer felt betrayed by his husband. He felt like a winner. Her life, which she had so carefully built, crumbled right before his eyes. "Goodbye, Brittany," he muttered, starting the engine. "Enjoy the new reality." Brittany moaned as consciousness slowly began to return to her. His head throbbed with pain, his mouth was dry, and the air in the room was heavy and stale. She tried to move, but found herself lying on a hard mattress, her wrists aching from the tight ropes that had recently been removed from her. Her gaze darted around the room. Stone walls, dim light, the only window with massive bars. The door is iron, with a small viewing window. Brittany sat up abruptly, terror shooting through her chest. "What the hell?" she whispered breathlessly, rushing to the door and pounding on it with her fists. "Let me out." The sound of heels made her freeze. The door slowly opened, and Sonia Rivera appeared in the opening. Wearing a dark, elegant dress, she entered the room with an icy grin, her presence instantly overwhelming. "I woke up," she drawled, crossing her arms over her chest. "Welcome to your new life." Brittany stepped back in panic, her back hitting the wall. "Where am I? What have you done to me?" Sonia tilted her head as if looking at a new toy. Nothing, dear. It was your loving husband who decided that you needed a new path in life." Brittany clenched her fists, her eyes flashing with hatred. "Matt," she hissed. "This bastard." Sonia grinned, taking out a cigarette and lighting it. "You are mine now." She slowly exhaled smoke into Brittany's face. "Your husband said that you love money. This means you will earn them. Work." Brittany's eyes widened and her lips trembled. You can't." Her voice broke. "Oh, but I can, and I will." Sonia leaned closer, her voice became soft, almost tender. "You always wanted a luxurious life, expensive things, attention, right? Well, now you'll get them. Just not in the way you thought." Brittany clutched the edges of her dress, trying not to cry. "No, I don't." She could barely speak. Sonia took another drag and straightened up. "Now you get up, put yourself in order, because your first client will arrive soon." "Client?" Brittany gasped, her hands shaking. "No, no, please." Sonia raised a finger, silencing her. "Oh dear, you love to be the center of attention, right? Now you will have plenty of it. Welcome to the real world, doll." Brittany took a few steps back, her legs giving way, and she sank onto the hard mattress. "You have no right." Her voice was weak, but there was still a remnant of pride in it. I'm not some cheap bitch." Sonia laughed. Her laughter was cold, filled with contempt. "No, dear, you are an expensive woman of easy virtue, but otherwise the difference is small." Brittany clenched her hands into fists, her nails digging into her palms. "I won't do this. Never." Sonia leisurely walked around the room, her heels clicking loudly on the floor. "Everyone has a price, and you will find yours. The question is not whether you will do it, but how long your submission will take." She stopped at the exit and turned around. "Get yourself in order. In an hour, people will come who will explain the rules to you. If you behave well, perhaps your life will not become a complete hell." Brittany couldn't believe what was happening. It was a nightmare. But looking into Sonia's icy eyes, she realized that this was reality, and she has no choice. Brittany lay on the hard mattress, staring at the ceiling, where the dim lamplight cast eerie shadows. The skin burned from other people's touches, and inside there was only emptiness. She didn't cry. There was no point in crying. Everything she had collapsed in one moment. She is no longer Brittany Collins, no longer a socialite, no longer the wife of a successful businessman. Now she's just a commodity. Her body was still shaking, but not from the cold, from humiliation, from the realization that her beauty, which she had always been proud of, had become her curse. It is no longer a tool of power, no longer a way to achieve what you want. Now it's just a shell, available to anyone willing to pay. You love money, don't you? Sonia's voice sounded in my head. Brittany closed her eyes, gritting her teeth. Yes, she loved money. She had lived all her life for them, but now they no longer belonged to her. Now she earned them not from shopping, not from glamorous events, but by spreading her legs in front of rich fat men who saw her as just another toy. She tried to resist at first, but Sonia was right, everyone has a price. She couldn't stand it. She was broken. No matter how much she convinced herself that she would find a way out, that this was temporary, her body said otherwise. It no longer belonged to her. The door opened. Brittany shuddered and instinctively pressed herself against the mattress. Sonia entered, her heels quietly clicking on the floor. She held a glass of wine in her hands. "How do you feel?" she asked mockingly. Brittany was silent. She didn't even look at her. "You liked it," Sonia continued, taking a sip. "You wanted to be desired, to be the center of attention. Now you enjoy it to the fullest." Brittany slowly turned her head. There was no more anger in her eyes, only emptiness. "You destroyed me," she said hoarsely. Sonia grinned and sat down on the edge of the bed. "No, dear. You destroyed yourself when you decided you could play with other people's lives without consequences." Brittany wanted to say something, but instead she just closed her eyes. She understood the main thing. There is no way out of here. She will forever remain here in a golden cage where her body will be worth more than her soul. Trevor King stood in his apartment, looking at the letter that trembled in his hands. He had already read it 3 times, but the words still did not add up to a logical picture. It was impossible. Brittany couldn't just disappear, and she certainly couldn't leave it to him. "Trevor, I thought about this for a long time and realized that I had made a mistake. All this time my husband was nearby, and I was looking for something more where he was not. Matt had always been my rock, and now I realize that I belong to him. I'm leaving, and I ask you not to look for me anymore. Don't try to contact me. This is the end. B." Trevor clenched the paper in his fist, feeling anger coursing through his veins. This couldn't be true. It was fake. Brittany would never write that. She hated Matt. She planned to leave him, to take everything from him. And suddenly this. He rushed to the phone and dialed her number. Horns, 1, 2, 3, and then the voice of the answering machine. He tried again, and again. The same series of silent beeps, which only intensified his rage. "Crap," he barked, throwing the phone on the table. Trevor began to pace around the room, trying to collect his thoughts. He was a smart man, a lawyer who had to deal with similar situations more than once. But now his mind refused to work. Where is she? Where could she have gone? He called the hotel where they were supposed to meet a couple of days ago. Brittany didn't register. The staff didn't see her. "This can't be true," he muttered, grabbing the car keys. He headed to her house, hoping to find at least some trace. But the house was empty. No signs of a struggle, no signs of a hasty departure. It looked like Brittany had simply disappeared. The only thing left is the damned letter. Trevor King didn't know he was being followed. He was too focused on finding Brittany, too blind to notice that his own life was hanging in the balance. Over the past few days, he visited all her favorite places, called her friends, and tried to find out at least something about her disappearance. But nothing. Brittany seemed to disappear. Anxiety grew within him, which soon gave way to panic. He was sure Matt was involved in her disappearance, but there was no evidence. A divorce lawyer, a man who is used to being in control of every situation, now finds himself trapped in the unknown. In the evening, when he finally left the office, a black, moonless night and a deserted parking lot awaited him. He looked around nervously before getting into the car. Inside, he turned on the headlights, took a deep breath, and ran a hand over his face. Brittany is missing. Career hanging by a thread. Everything was falling apart. He started the engine and drove out onto the road. The silence of the night city was soothing, but he had no idea that this was his last calm moment. He was being followed. The black SUV kept its distance, not attracting attention. The man behind the wheel spoke into the headset. He's on his way. Everything is going according to plan. Headlights suddenly appeared at one of the intersections. Bright, blinding. The car was rushing straight towards him. Trevor sharply pulled the steering wheel to the side, but it was too late. Hit. The car overturned. The sound of metal, the squeal of brakes, people screaming. Darkness. When Trevor woke up in the hospital, he realized that he could not move his legs. Panic gripped him, but something else tormented him, even more the whispers of doctors, nurses, and journalists who were already crowding at the door. He tried to raise his arm, but the muscles did not obey. My eyes were dark from pain, but my mind was working clearly. He's alive. But something is wrong. The door of the room opened, and a doctor in a white coat entered. His face expressed sympathy, but his voice sounded professionally detached. "Mr. King, you were in a serious accident. Your spine is damaged. We did our best, but," he hesitated, "most likely you will not be able to walk." The doctor's words hit like a hammer. Trevor slowly lowered his head onto the pillow, feeling his life falling apart. But it didn't end there. Rumors spread like lightning. Leela took care of it. Trevor King is a swindler, a profiteer, a traitor. The lawyer got into an accident under mysterious circumstances. Criminal connections. Who wanted to remove King? His name appeared in the newspapers, his face appeared in news stories. Clients began to refuse his services. Partners avoid meetings. His office was torn by journalists with questions about his illegal machinations. Everything he had built over the years collapsed in a matter of days. And Matt sat in his office, looking at the photos of the accident, and slowly smiled. He knew Trevor was broken now. He knew that his enemy would never again be the same confident, smug lawyer who tried to ruin his life. He took out an envelope containing a note from the box. Simple words written by someone's hand. "You thought you could take everything from me? Now you have nothing." Matt looked again at the pictures of the wrecked car overturned on the dark highway. He took a glass of whiskey, took a sip, and said with cold confidence, "Now you know what it means to lose everything, Trevor." Here is the most extended version of the chapter, 1 year later, subtitled Life in Captivity, focusing only on this stage of Brittany's story without getting ahead of ourselves. I will add details, emotions, and inner experiences to make it deep and exciting. It's been a year since Brittany fell into the clutches of Sonia Rivera. Every morning begins the same way. A sharp knock on the door of her room is a signal that it's time to get up. The room, although furnished with expensive furniture, looks more like a golden cage. Silk sheets, a mirrored ceiling, and heavy velvet curtains cannot hide the steel bars on the windows. The light coming through the cracks is the only reminder of the outside world she has lost. Brittany has learned to live by a strict routine. In the morning shower, makeup, hair styling, all under the supervision of Sonia's silent assistants. She is made to look flawless. Bright lipstick that emphasizes her full lips, mascara that hides the marks of sleepless nights, and a dress that hugs her body like a second skin. She looks in the mirror and barely recognizes herself. Her face is still beautiful, but her eyes are empty like a doll's. She once took pride in her appearance, now it is her curse. Day after day, Brittany serves clients rich men whose faces merge into one blurry spot. Some of them are rough, demanding the impossible, leaving bruises on her skin. Others are sweetly polite, whispering compliments that make her sick. One of them, an elderly businessman with gray temples, once said, "You are too good for such a place." She smiled as she was taught, but inside she screamed from powerlessness. Each such visit takes a piece of her soul away from her, and she feels how the pride she once lived with dissolves in the sticky air of the rooms. After work, Brittany returns to her room, where only silence awaits her. She is not allowed to communicate with other girls whom Sonia keeps here. Sometimes she hears their footsteps behind the wall, muffled sobs or laughter, but that's all. Her only friend is a small mirror in which she sees how her face begins to fade from stress. Wrinkles in the corners of the eyes, which were not there before, are becoming more and more noticeable. She whispers to herself, "You're still beautiful," but her voice trembles and the words sound like mockery. On nights when sleep doesn't come, Brittany lies in the dark and remembers her old life. A luxurious home in Nashville, a closet full of designer dresses, parties where she was the queen. She thinks about Matt, his strong arms, the tired smile that she took for granted. Now she understands that he was her anchor, and she herself cut the rope. Thoughts about Trevor only bring bitterness. His promises of wealth and freedom brought her here, to this prison. Her days became an endless cycle. In the morning preparation, in the afternoon clients, at night loneliness. The food they bring her is delicious, but she eats without pleasure, just to survive. Sometimes Sonia comes in to check on her, coldly looking her up and down. "You're still making money," she says with a small smile, and Brittany wants to grab her by the throat. But she is silent, looking down, because she knows any disobedience is pain. Brittany once considered herself superior to others, a model, the wife of a successful man, a woman who could get whatever she wanted. Now she's a nobody. Clients call her darling or pretty, but no one asks her name. Her personality has been erased, leaving only a shell. She finds herself sometimes forgetting what her own voice sounds like real, not the fake one she uses to please others. Pride, her main trump card, is gone, leaving a void that nothing can fill. Brittany sat on the hard mattress in her tiny room, looking at the gray walls that had become her prison. Her world shrank to a few square meters, where there was only a narrow window with bars, a metal door, and a mirror that she had long stopped looking at. She no longer recognized herself. A pale face, a dull look, the skin that she had once cherished and cherished so much was now alien, as if it belonged to someone else. The days dragged on endlessly. Brittany lost track of time. She didn't know how many weeks or months had passed since she got here. Time has become a blurry shadow, and fear and hopelessness are its constant companions. But unlike the first months, when she was plunged into despair, now an idea was born in her head. The idea, which gradually grew stronger, became a plan. She couldn't stay here. She had to run away. She began to watch. Notice details that previously escaped her attention. Some came into her room more often, some just did their job, and some did it reluctantly. She needed to find the weak link, a person who could be persuaded and won over to his side. Not everyone here had blind loyalty to Sonia. Some simply did what they were paid to do. One of these was Victor, a tall, strong man with a hard look. He was one of the guards who kept order in this place. Brittany noticed that he drank more often than others, and there was sometimes a carelessness in his movements. He was not like the others. He wasn't cruel, but he didn't show much interest in what was happening either. She watched him for a week. I was looking for a moment when he would be more vulnerable, when he would weakly hold on to his role. One night, when Victor came into her room for another routine inspection, she took the first step. "Victor," she whispered, coming closer. He looked up lazily, crossing his arms over his chest. "What do you want?" "I have a proposal, one that will make you rich." He grinned, but didn't back down. Brittany felt like she was hooked. "I'm listening." "Money. Big money. I have connections. There are people who will pay you if you do me a favor." He narrowed his eyes, studying her. "What service?" Brittany pretended to hesitate, then leaned closer. "Let me out of here. Give me a chance to disappear." Victor chuckled and shook his head. "Do you really think I'm that stupid?" She shrugged. "I think that you are not one of those who remains faithful to the end. You want more than just being a security guard in a dirty place. You can take the money and leave, start a new life." He thought for a moment, then looked at her. "Fine, but if you deceive me." "I won't deceive you," she promised. The deal was done. Brittany couldn't believe Victor agreed, But she didn't let herself get her hopes up too much. Now we had to wait for the right moment. The night of her escape came faster than she thought. Victor came for her later than usual. His face was tense but determined. "It's now or never," he muttered. Brittany nodded. Her heart was pounding wildly in her chest, but she couldn't afford to make a mistake. She took the first step towards freedom, and at that moment, something inside her said, "You will never be the same Brittany again." Brittany didn't believe she would see this city again. Her legs were shaking as she got off the bus at the familiar station. The air in Nashville was damp, saturated with the smell of asphalt after rain, but it was foreign to her. Everything around her seemed both familiar and distant, as if it was a city from the past in which she no longer belonged to herself. Her clothes hung loosely on her hair had lost its former shine, and there were deep shadows under her eyes. People passed by without recognizing her. She was no longer the dazzling Brittany Collins, wife of a successful businessman, queen of her little world. Now she was nobody. She walked to the curb and raised her hand, hailing a taxi. "Where are we going?" the driver asked, looking at her in the rearview mirror. Brittany opened her mouth to answer, but hesitated for a second. The address she was about to give still felt like home to her. But was he like that now? "To the suburbs, to the Collins house," she finally said. The taxi started moving. The city flashed past the windows, and every turn of the road brought back painful memories to her. She remembered trips with Matt, their conversations, his touch. It was all an illusion. Now she knows it. As the car stopped, Brittany felt her breath catch in her throat. She walked out, looking at the house that had once been her fortress, her refuge. But it was empty. There was tall grass growing on the lawn. There were no lights in the windows. The door was closed, and there was a sign on the gate, "Sold." Brittany froze. Her lips moved silently, but there were no words. It was not a house, but a ghost of her past. Matt sold everything, disappeared. He erased himself from her life, just as she had once tried to erase him. She took a few steps, feeling panic rising inside her. She pushed the gate closed. She walked up to the porch and knocked on the door. Silence. "No," she whispered, clenching her fists. She felt as if the world had collapsed again, this time completely. Matt left. He left her no chance or explanation. She hoped that she could return, that she would have the opportunity to at least try to fix something. But it was all over. She turned away from the house and walked slowly down the street. She had nowhere to go. Brittany sat at the bar, leaning over a glass of cheap whiskey. Her fingers trembled as she brought it to her lips. She didn't know how much time had passed. The hours didn't matter. Brittany Collins, what a surprise. Her heart sank. She knew that voice. Leila Morgan sat down opposite her, slowly taking off her sunglasses. Her gaze was as cold as always. "You look, Leila paused, looking Brittany up and down. In a different way. Brittany didn't answer. She just lowered her eyes into the glass. Leila took an envelope out of her bag and put it on the table. "This is for you." Brittany didn't move. "What is this?" Her voice was hoarse. "Look." She took the envelope slowly, her hands shaking. She tore the paper and took out several photographs. Matt was on them. Calm, confident. He was happy. The last thing she pulled out was a letter. Brittany unfolded the note. The handwriting was smooth and familiar. "You wanted my life. This is your freedom." The world swam before my eyes again. Brittany clutched the letter, trying to control her breathing. My throat was tight, pain was pounding in my temples. Leila watched her, shaking her head slightly. "He didn't leave you anything, Brittany," she said calmly. "Everything you had, everything you planned, is gone. You got what you deserve." Brittany couldn't sit there any longer. She jumped up, staggered, and grabbed the table. Leila didn't move. "Where are you going now?" she asked. Brittany didn't know. At that moment, she realized that there was no turning back for her. No Matt, no money, no power. All that was left was emptiness. She ran out of the bar, disappearing into the night, but Leila's voice still sounded in her head. "You got what you deserved." Colorado greeted him with peace and quiet. The small town, lost among the mountains, seemed an ideal refuge for a man who decided to leave his past behind. Here no one knew his real name, no one knew about his pain, revenge, and about the woman he once loved and hated at the same time. Matt was now just John Rivers, the owner of a small bar on the outskirts of town. The old Peak Bar became more than just a business for him. He was his new life, his chance to become a different person. Here he was not a former military man, a betrayed husband, or a man who carried out the perfect revenge. Here he was the one who opened the doors of his establishment every morning, brewed the best coffee in the area, and poured whiskey to those who came to talk about life. The city residents accepted him quickly. He was not a man of many words, but he was respected for his honesty and hard work. He did not talk about himself, but listened to others. People were drawn to him, not even suspecting that the ghosts of the past were hiding behind his calm gaze. Every morning he went out onto the porch, drank black coffee, and looked at the mountains that surrounded the city. They were silent witnesses to his new path, his rebirth. Nobody asked him about the past, and he was in no hurry to remember it. This was his new life, and he treasured it more than ever. She came into his life as easily as walking into a bar after a long day. No big words, no drama. Her name was Anna, a local girl who worked in a bookstore. Smiling, kind, with a warmth in her eyes that Matt hadn't seen for many years. They met by chance when she walked into a bar one evening to escape a sudden rain. He handed her a glass of hot tea, and at that moment something clicked between them. Not passion, not flame, but something more real, calm and warm, like the soft light of a lamp on a winter night. Anna didn't ask questions he didn't want to hear. She was not interested in his past, did not try to look behind the veil of secrecy. She was just there, and that was enough. A year later, they got married. The wedding was modest, without pomp, but exactly what Matt wanted. No falsehood, no pretense. Just him, her, and a few close friends who during this time became his new family. They bought a small house near the bar, overlooking the mountains. Anna often spent her evenings reading by the fireplace, and Matt listened to her voice, enjoying her presence. Sometimes he wondered if he deserved this calm happiness. After everything he had done, after the revenge he had lived for in recent years. But Anna never asked, never judged. She simply loved him for who he was. In the evening, when the bar closed, Matt liked to go out onto the porch and look at the mountains. They were majestic, motionless, as unchanging as life itself. He took a sip of whiskey, inhaled the cold air, and felt a strange but pleasant peace. Anna sometimes came out to him, silently hugged him from the back, and laid her head on his shoulder. She knew there was a part of his heart that she could never fill, but she didn't try. She was just there, and that was enough. One day, looking at the setting sun, Matt said quietly, "Justice is fate." Anna looked at him without asking what he meant. She simply took his hand, and they continued to watch the sun disappear behind the horizon, leaving behind only long shadows of the past. At that moment, Matt knew he was finally free. Free from pain, from anger, from the past. He chose his destiny, and it brought him here to a life he never dreamed of, but which turned out to be exactly what he needed. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think click to the next one.